AITA for refusing to switch wedding venues after finding out my fiancé's best man can't attend the one we picked, when changing it would mean losing my grandmother's only chance to be there. This is a long one, so bear with me, because I think the details actually matter a lot here. My fiancé, I'll call him Mark, and I have been together for 5 years and engaged for the last 8 months. We're getting married in October. I'm going to call myself Rachel for this. About a year and a half ago, my grandmother was diagnosed with a progressive neurological condition. Without getting too deep into the medical specifics, the short version is that it affects her mobility and her stamina significantly, and it's the kind of condition that only moves in one direction. She's currently still able to travel short distances and sit through events with the right accommodations, but her doctors have been honest with our family that this window is not going to last forever. Possibly a year, possibly 2, nobody really knows for cert. My grandmother basically raised me for a huge chunk of my childhood while my parents worked long hours, and she is, without exaggeration, one of the most important people in my entire life. I used to spend every summer at her house growing up. She taught me how to cook, how to garden, how to stand my ground in an argument without losing my temper, which honestly might be the most useful thing anyone's ever taught me. When Mark proposed, the very first thing I thought about, before almost anything else, was making sure she could be there. So when we started venue hunting, this became a real constraint, not just a preference. We needed somewhere with no stairs, accessible bathrooms, somewhere she could be wheeled in close to the ceremony space without a long walk, and somewhere with seating that could accommodate her needing to occasionally lie back or take pressure off her hips during a longer event. We toured probably 12 venues over 4 months. It was honestly exhausting. The first place we looked at was gorgeous online, this old converted barn with string lights and exposed wood beams, but the second we walked in, we realized the only bathroom was down a flight of stairs in the basement. The coordinator there tried to convince us we could set up a portable, accessible bathroom outside, but that felt like exactly the kind of afterthought accommodation I didn't want my grandmother to have to deal with on what's supposed to be a joyful day. Another venue had beautiful grounds, but gravel pathways everywhere, which sounds minor until you actually try pushing a wheelchair through loose gravel. We learned more about accessibility logistics in those 4 months than I ever thought I'd need to know. We finally found one, a renovated estate about 40 minutes outside the city, that checked every single box. Fully accessible, beautiful gardens, smooth paved pathways throughout, and the event's coordinator there was honestly incredible about working with us on the specific accommodations my grandmother would need. She even walked the entire property with us, pushing an empty wheelchair herself, just to physically test every route we'd need on the day. I cried a little in the parking lot afterward, just from the relief of finally finding somewhere that wasn't going to require me to apologize to my own grandmother for the venue. We booked it. We put down a significant non-refundable deposit. We sent out save the dates with the venue location on them. This was about 5 months ago. I remember feeling like the hardest part of the planning was finally behind us. Last month, Mark's best man, who I'll call Tyler, found out that he has a scheduling conflict. Tyler is in the military, and he just learned that the specific dates of a training rotation he can't get out of overlap with our wedding weekend. He's devastated about it, genuinely, and so is Mark. Tyler and Mark have been best friends since middle school. Tyler was there for some of the hardest years of Mark's life, including when Mark's dad passed away during our 2nd year of dating, and Mark has always pictured him standing up there as his best man. Here's where it gets complicated. Tyler's unit apparently has a small, narrow window about 3 weeks earlier than our current date where he could actually get approved leave if we were willing to move the wedding. Mark came to me with this one evening, clearly torn up about it, sat me down at the kitchen table, and just kind of laid the whole situation out, and asked if there was any way we could consider shifting the date to make that window work. I asked, obviously, what that would mean for the venue. The event's coordinator confirmed, after Mark called the next morning, that the venue is booked solid for that earlier date. No flexibility there, they already had another wedding scheduled. So shifting to a date Tyler could attend would mean losing our venue entirely and finding a new one in under 3 weeks. an impossible timeline for a venue with the accessibility requirements we need, especially after how long it took us to find this one in the first place. Realistically, it would mean either rushing into a venue we hadn't fully vetted for those needs, or accepting a venue that doesn't fully meet them and hoping for the best. I told Mark, as gently as I could, that I wasn't willing to do that. I told him I understood how much Tyler meant to him and how painful this was, but that my grandmother's ability to be at our wedding at all was not something I was willing to gamble on a venue we hadn't properly vetted, especially not under a 3-week timeline. I suggested alternatives. Could Tyler be involved remotely in some way? A video message played at the reception, a toast recorded ahead of time. Could Mark designate a different friend as best man for the day itself, while still honoring Tyler's role in their friendship in some other way, like a separate celebration after he's back from training? Could we look into whether there was any flexibility at all on Tyler's end, even partial leave for just part of the day? Mark didn't take it well. He said I was being incredibly rigid about this, that my grandmother, and I want to be careful how I phrase what he said because I don't want to make him sound more callous than he was being. But the gist of it was that he felt I was treating my family's needs as automatically more important than his, without really sitting with how much Tyler not being there would hurt him. He pointed out that we don't actually know for certain my grandmother's condition will decline as fast as the doctors think, that these prognoses aren't exact, and that I might be making an irreversible decision, losing his best friend's presence at his own wedding, based on a worst-case scenario that might not even happen. That comment really hurt, honestly. It felt like he was asking me to gamble my grandmother's last real chance to see me get married against a future that might not be as bad as we fear. And the thing is, I understand his logic. He's not wrong that medical timelines are estimates, not guarantees, but I also know my grandmother. I've watched her decline over the last year and a half, watched her go from walking with a cane to needing a walker to now needing the wheelchair for anything beyond short distances. I don't think I'm catastrophizing. I think I'm being realistic about something that the people who actually love her have all quietly accepted, even if we don't say it out loud very often. We had a few really difficult days after that conversation. We were barely speaking, just the logistics of daily life, who's picking up groceries, whether the dog's been fed, nothing real. I remember lying awake one night feeling like we'd hit our first genuine crossroads as a couple, where it wasn't just a disagreement we could talk through in 20 minutes. It actually felt like it might mean something about whether we saw the world the same way. Mark eventually called Tyler to talk it through directly. He told me afterward he almost didn't, because part of him was scared of what Tyler might say, scared that hearing it from Tyler himself would make the whole thing feel even more unfair. But he called anyway, on speaker in our living room, and from what I overheard, Tyler actually said something that surprised both of us. Tyler said that if it came down to choosing between him being there and Mark's wife's grandmother being there genuinely wasn't a choice to make, and that he'd be upset with Mark if Mark even considered putting that on the table. His exact words, as close as I can remember them, were something like, "Dude, I'll have 100 more weekends with you. She might not have another wedding. Keep the date." He told Mark to keep the original date, said he'd be there in spirit, and asked if they could do a separate just the two of them weekend trip when he's back from the rotation to properly celebrate, just for the friendship, completely separate from the wedding. Mark hung up the phone and just sat there quiet for a minute. Then he came over and apologized, properly this time, not the kind of half-apology people give when they're still partly arguing their original point. He said hearing Tyler say it, that plainly made him realize he'd been so caught up in his own grief about missing Tyler at the wedding that he hadn't fully sat with what he was actually asking me to risk. We're keeping the original date and venue. But here's why I'm still not totally sure I'm in the clear on this one. A few of my bridesmaids, when I told them the whole story, were split. One said I handled it exactly right, that my grandmother's window is closing and Mark's logic about uncertain medical timelines, while not wrong in the abstract, wasn't fair to apply to a situation this specific and time-sensitive. But another friend pushed back a little. She said that even though it worked out because Tyler was incredibly gracious about it, I never actually gave real weight to Mark's grief in the moment. She said I came in with a list of alternatives almost immediately, which, while practical, might have felt to Mark like I was trying to solve the problem instead of first just sitting with him in how sad he was about it. She said that even when you're right about the practical outcome, how you arrive there with your partner matters, and that I might have steamrolled past his emotional process to get to the logistics. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to move my wedding date and venue for my fiancé's best man's military conflict, even though it turned out fine in the end. Looking back, I don't think I was wrong about the actual decision. The stakes were never even close to equal. One path risked a friend missing a wedding he could celebrate with Mark another time. The other risked my grandmother never getting another chance like this one at all. Mark agreed once he sat with it, and Tyler, the person who supposedly had the most to lose, saw it the same way immediately. That told me everything. Where I'll admit I fell short was in how I handled the conversation itself. I jumped straight into problem-solving mode before Mark had a chance to just feel sad about it for a minute. You can hold a firm boundary and still make space for someone's grief first. I didn't do both at the same time, and I think that's the part I'd actually go back and change if I could. If you've ever been right about a decision, but handled the conversation around it badly, I'd love to hear how you worked through that.